Hey guys, welcome to Masquerade of Motherhood, or as I like to call it, the Mom Show. I'm your host, Courtney Doyle, and this is a place where I am giving you permission to not have it all together. Hey guys, welcome back to the Unmasking Me series. Today's episode is about a woman who exemplifies great faith, about a wife who is a leader and who is willing to encourage her husband and communicate with him. And it's about a mom who experiences great heartache. But at the end of the day, her trust and faith in the Lord's plan for her son is what stood out to me so much. I want to introduce you to my next mom. As a mom, do you ever feel like you've lost your identity? Like you used to be something else. Possibly in your pre-children life, you were, I don't know, a nurse, a doctor, a sales associate. Maybe you were a businesswoman. You owned your own business. The list is endless of the professions that we could have had prior to giving birth to our children. But then it happened. Motherhood. Your life is now identified as the before and after of when you had children. You no longer identify as your profession. Hi, I'm Courtney and I do X, Y, or Z. But now, hi, I'm Courtney. I'm the mother to, Hamilton, Harrison, Chandler, Carrington. My list is long. As our children age and they begin to get involved in things, our new identity blossoms. And now when you speak to people, hi, I'm Courtney. I'm John Scott's mom. Our identity is slowly and surely lost, and our new identity takes form. There's another form of lost identity, maybe one by selection, where you don't want to be known. Some of us live with shame and guilt from our past, and man, when that rears its ugly head, you truly wish people would forget your name. Let's be honest. Kids aren't perfect. They have free will. And as we've seen with some of the other moms, they can make poor choices, and we can very quickly take ownership of their choices if we aren't careful. We can let their choices become a direct reflection of our mothering abilities. If we had done this or that, they wouldn't have made this choice or that choice. What will others think of us as mothers? Self-condemnation can be an ugly thing, and we can easily fall into it. Have you ever pondered this question? What if God's plan for them hurts? What if it's ugly for a season as they become who He created them to be? Do you want to be known as their mother in that season? Can you find joy, peace, and pride in the ugly? I want to look at a mom today whose name we actually do not know. And for me, I can feel that this may have been okay with her at times. Her son was rebellious. She was faithful. He was defiant. She was obedient. He was full of lust. She was full of love. All we know of her is she is the wife of Manoah and the mother of Samson. You may know the story. That name may ring a bell. Prostitute's strength, long flowing hair. But I bet you didn't think about his mother. I want you to meet her in Judges chapter 13. Here's what it says. A certain man of Zorah named Manoah from the clan of the Danites had a wife who was childless, unable to give birth. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, "You are barren and childless, but you are going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. Now see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and have a son whose head is never to be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazirite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hand of the Philistines." First, let's point out that the text tells us that the angel of the Lord appeared to her. Does this ring a bell? Remember a few episodes back, we talked about Hagar at the well, and the angel of the Lord, El Roi, coming to her, the God who sees. You see, God sees this mother. And at this point, she has been childless, like so many others that we have talked about. It's quite a familiar theme. She has probably longed for a child for many years, dreamed about what that would be like. She couldn't wait to hold and love that child, raise that child, and with this promise from the Lord of what he was to be. Now, the God who sees her has come to her, given her a message that this long-awaited reward of a child was coming. But he does give very specific rules. The angel tells her that from the womb, this child is to be a Nazirite. And you may be like, what does that even mean? I didn't know either, so I looked it up. Nazirite comes from the Hebrew word Nazir, meaning consecrated to the service of God or separated one. A Nazirite vow was sometimes temporary, typically for a period of 6 months to a year. But this boy, Samson, will be a Nazirite from birth, set apart, consecrated to do God's work until the day of his death. And it's a vow that his parents agreed to for him. The rules the Nazirite men followed were they must abstain from wine, including grapes of the vine. They aren't allowed to touch any dead bodies, animals or humans, and they cannot cut their hair. The instructions are clear in verse 4 that Samson's mother was to also follow these rules even while he was in her womb. Now, this may be like, well, yeah, this is kind of a given. We know we should take very good care of our bodies when we're pregnant. It didn't make her a Nazirite herself, but it helped her in the pregnancy of this child, and it shows us what obedience looks like. She listened, and she was faithful. But here's what's so cool about this, is this angel did not appear to her once. He came to her again to reassure her that she had in fact heard him correctly. It also is the moment when it helps her husband to believe what she's told him. Have you ever heard from the Lord? I think sometimes we discount that the Holy Spirit is speaking to us and that we are hearing from him. Maybe when we've had that mother's instinct or that gut feeling that the Holy Spirit is leading you or your children or maybe you and your husband in a specific way, don't discount that he speaks to you. Last week, I told a story of our house, and that was definitely a time that I could feel the Lord moving in our lives, and Scott wasn't so sure. But God was so gracious to send us a sign and another sign so both of us would follow where he was leading. And this is kind of what happens in this story as well. She hears from this angel of the Lord. She reports back to her husband. He's not real sure, and he says, hey, God, can you send that angel back? I want to be clear. Well, he does. And again, he sends it to the wife. He's not there. The husband's not there. And so she then runs and gets him and says, come and see. This is what I'm being told. You know, I believe women hear from God all the time. Not necessarily more than men. But we can be content in quiet. Our hearts are soft, compassionate by nature. We're more emotional. Honestly, we're more readily seeking answers and willing to listen sometimes. Men are often doers. They're void of too much emotion because they're tough. You don't typically find a man just pondering what's happened, and you certainly don't see very many men seeking answers the way a woman will. We ask a lot of questions. Okay. I'm not going to pick on men anymore. They too hear from God. I'm not saying they don't, but I mean, they don't like to ask for directions. So we've got to consider that. But may I suggest that it's absolutely possible and acceptable for a woman to hear from the Lord and then to lead and communicate that with her husband, to follow her in that which is godly and virtuous. Samson's mother did just that. She has to prove to him that the angel did in fact come, and the message was very clear. Manoah himself, when he realizes it, cries out and says, give me some clarification that what my wife has heard is true, and share the direction in which we should raise this boy. I love this about this relationship. He was willing to listen to her and even more willing to go to the Lord for clarification. What a sweet, understanding, proactive husband. This story does kind of take a funny twist. Once Manoah realizes this, in fact, was the angel of the Lord, he becomes so overwhelmed and concerned. The verse 22 says, we're doomed to die. That's it. We're doomed to die. And here we go. His sweet wife, in all her faith and wisdom, answers, if the Lord had meant to kill us, he would have not accepted a burnt offering and grain offering from our hands, nor shown us all these things, or now told us this. I love how in this moment, he is being emotional. He is struggling with some fear, and she's reminding him of the reality, and she's reminding him that there is nothing to fear. She's kind of talking him off the ledge. It's just, this whole conversation, I think, is so key on an example of great communication in a marriage. You know, the wife may have been the quote unquote weaker vessel, but she was the stronger believer. And that's why the angel chose to appear to her. Are you the stronger believer? Or is it your husband? I want to give you an opportunity to pray right now for both of you to believe equally. If one is the leader, pray for the other to be willing to be open to being led. It's a beautiful example of a wife and a mother. She is so patient, so faithful, obedient, wise, willing, and encouraging to her husband. She gives him grace as he deciphers this message for himself. Do any of those attributes speak to you as a wife or as a mother? You know, her character's not going to change because she has a child. Her identity doesn't change. She is who she is because God created her for a specific purpose, to carry this Nazarite man whose strength will be like no others, and who sadly wasn't quite what he could have been. Here's another question. Are you a mother to a could have? Samson grew up and the Lord blessed him. The Spirit of the Lord began to stir in him while he was in Dan. Here's where the story begins to teach us lessons as mothers, and as fathers. Samson went to Timnah, where he saw a young Philistine woman. Remember, he is the chosen one from the Lord to save the Israelites from the Philistine people. And now he's falling in love with a Philistine woman. His parents do what any good parents would do, and they questioned and they warned. It says in verse 3, his father and mother replied, isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among all of our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife? You see, a marriage to this woman would have been a disgrace to the family. Why would he fall in love and marry the enemy's daughter? Defiance at its finest. But his parents gave in to him. They allowed him to marry even though they could have refused. Well, they're traveling back to Timnah. Samson was in the vineyard, and a young lion came roaring toward him. The Spirit of the Lord comes over him, and with his mighty strength, Samson tears this lion apart with his hands. But he doesn't tell his mother and father about the incident. Again, he's being deceitful. On his return to marry the woman, Samson comes across the dead lion's body. Keep in mind, he is bound by those rules, which says absolutely do not touch anything dead or eat anything unclean. Well, Samson thinks he knows better, and as he passes the lion carcass, he notices that bees and honey are in the carcass. So he decides to eat it and share it with his parents, though they have no idea where this has come from. The parallel here between this moment and the one we've already talked about in the Garden of Eden, when Eve is eating of the tree of life and then she shares it, sounds very familiar, doesn't it? When we love someone, we want to trust them. As moms, we don't want to admit that our kids make foolish decisions, and due to our love for them, sometimes we partake in their honey. We cover lies because we don't want to see the truth. It's easier to coat that sin in something sweet and pray they don't do it again. I wish I could say this was the last time Samson acted irrationally, but it's not. He continued to make poor choices, foolish decisions, and through it all, the Spirit of the Lord continued to come over him. The full story of Samson and his ultimate death are found in Judges chapters 14 through 16. For the sake of staying on topic, which is his mother, I'm not going to detail the events of the rest of his life. I will say, women were his weakness. He was full of revenge, he welcomed pride, danced with deceit, and ultimately lost. He was his own undoing. You see, God didn't abandon Samson, but he did let him suffer the consequences of his own decisions. In the final chapter of Samson's life, we see where he has been imprisoned, he's lost his sight, he's bound with bronze shackles, set to grind the grain in prison. This was typically a job reserved for animals. The picture of this is so similar to his lifestyle, and the lifestyles our children can be pulled into, losing sight of who they are, bound by sin and going round and round in seasons of lies, deceitfulness, pride, and ultimately destruction. There's no other mention of Samson's mom, and only one other mention of his father, which is sadly when Samson has died. It says his father and brothers come to retrieve his body for burial. I'm sure she was very present in his life, seen or unseen. I truly believe that who she was before children is exactly who she remained. She sought prayer, retreated to a quiet place, and was welcoming to the angel of the Lord when he came to speak to her. Imagine her heart, though, as she witnessed Samson, her shining son, chosen and set apart, making such decisions that didn't align with who he ultimately was supposed to become. Could she have changed it? Could she have done something different? Or did he have a personality that he wanted what he wanted when he wanted it, and he would use the strength from the Spirit of the Lord to get his way? I don't blame her at all for his inadequacies. Samson had free will, the ability to choose right from wrong, and in more cases than not, he chose wrong. Samson was called by God for one purpose: to drive the Philistines out for the sake of Israel. His mother knew his purpose. He knew his purpose. Oh, Samson, you could have. Regardless of Samson's choices, he did remain faithful and ultimately realized that only God could strengthen him. Just because his actions didn't always show his faith in God, he actually was very dependent upon him. Samson's story isn't a long one, but it didn't have to be for me to see the lessons for mothers all throughout it. Take care of yourself, especially when you're pregnant. Retreat to a quiet place. Pray for your children. Listen for the Lord's guidance. You can hear him, especially when it's in regard to your children. Be okay with standing back and letting your kids fail and fall. Don't give them what they want all the time, or you too may have a child that doesn't see their own sin because it's coated in honey that you shared. Oftentimes, when we're in the thick of sin, we are the last ones to recognize it. Discipline your children now. Don't wait to set rules and boundaries. Stick to them when you do. Consequences to bad behaviors are not a bad thing. We certainly don't want our children to be like Samson and think they can get away with anything. God has an end to his rope as well, and Samson never regained his sight. You know, our sins may heal, but the scars left behind may linger. I can't help but wonder if Samson's life would have been different if he was accustomed to heeding his parents' warnings. The fact may still remain that no matter how godly we are as parents, how faithful we are, our children have the ability to make their own decisions. Samson ultimately fulfilled the purpose God had for him. To the extent in which God had planned, possibly not. but his plan is always perfect. And due to Samson's faith at the end of his life, he did in fact kickstart the rescue of Israel from the Philistines. I can relate to what it must have felt like to be Samson's mother, knowing in your heart, being told by the angel of the Lord that he has great plans for your child, that he or she would be set apart for great works for the Lord. The real test is, are you capable, as a mother, to step back, watch your child fall, fail, suffer, learn, grow, all in order to become the person God designed them to be? It's not easy. Trust me. I have walked in her shoes, and as I share this podcast, I am in the middle of watching one of my own children suffer with extreme consequences for the choices he has made in his life. It is one of the single most difficult things I have ever done. Having faith, trusting that God's plan is so much better than my own, sounds easy until your baby is suffering. I think of him as holidays pass, family birthdays come and go, milestones are reached, vacations are experienced. Some days, every hour, I am reminded of him. I look at my 12-year-old who resembles him so much at this age, my 19-year-old who brings me back to when he was 19. And I'm certain that my heart may just stop beating at any moment because it's exhausted from hurting. I bet Samson's mom's heart hurt. As a matter of fact, I know it did. I also know that because she was able to have faith, pray, and practice obedience, God gave her unexplainable peace and joy, just as he has done with me. We may not know until the day we meet the Lord in heaven for the reasons things happen the way they do. But on this side of heaven, I choose to anchor my hope in him. He wants us. He will use us. He will use our children. Our identity is not lost to him. Are you willing to give him control? Until next time. If you want to print, screenshot, or share this week's verse, head to the show notes where you're going to find a link to my website and a graphic for you to use. Thanks so much for listening to Masquerade of Motherhood with Courtney Doyle. We want to be sure this blesses you and other mothers. And in order to do this, first, you must subscribe. This way you won't ever miss an episode. Also, if you'll rate and review this podcast on iTunes or wherever you're listening, this will increase our reach to other mothers who need a little encouragement, a community, and a whole lot of Jesus. We're so glad you're here.